All right, let's get into audience questions, Thanksgiving edition. First one is from Ray. Ray says, hey, David, in the context of Harvey Weinstein, I almost said Harvey Firestein, not at all, who is accused of anything, having done anything wrong. Harvey Weinstein, Donald Trump, Bill Cosby, Roy Moore, Al Franken, should the statute of limitations on sex crimes be abolished? This is an interesting question. So first of all, the statutes of limitations on sex crimes vary. There's a patchwork of laws depending on state to state. Sometimes there are exceptions when it is child sex crimes versus sex crimes against adults. And the argument for abolishing the statute of limitations would be, listen, it can take a long time for victims to be ready to come forward. There's huge stigma. And also, it can take a long time to identify the perpetrator. So that would be a reason to extend the statute of limitations on sex crimes. The counterpoint to that, a general one, which applies to many statutes of limitations, would be, listen, over time, evidence becomes degraded. This includes physical evidence. This includes people's memories, right? Eyewitness accounts. And you need some kind of a limited amount of time for a case to be put together. It just can't be indefinite. The system needs to work efficiently, and there needs to be something that will drive the victim and the justice system to move more quickly. So what do I think? I don't believe that the statute of limitations should be abolished on sex crimes, but I am up for the idea of extending it. I think that there is certainly an argument to be made there, but I think that really an area that needs to be looked at is tackling other parts of the problem, right? Which is, number one, people not feeling like they can report it quickly. Number two, the idea that if they report it, that they may not be taken seriously, or that there will be social repercussions and other repercussions. If we could work on that, we might be able to reduce the severity of the problem of people taking a long time to come forward to tell the story of what happened to them. And part of this, Pat, has to do with, will they believe me? Will it be considered real rape, or isn't it? Did I maybe do something wrong because of the victim blaming mentality that exists? So I think that there's a case to be made for extending the statute of limitations on sex crimes, but I think there's other stuff we have to tackle as well.
Do you know what the average length is for the statute of limitations? I'd imagine it depends on what state
It
you're in,
depends
right?
on the state. I think sometimes it's as short as a few years, and sometimes it can be as long as, could it be as long as 10 years in
Okay.
some places, maybe even 15?
Yeah, and I mean, sure, we can still litigate it in the court of public opinion. I mean, you take a look at the, 8 allegations against Senate candidate Roy Moore?
Yeah.
Yes, they were from 40 years ago.
Okay.
But it has to do with him becoming a U.S. senator. That's important now.
There's other ways. So even without extending the statute of limitations, there's still ways in which these allegations can have an impact modern day. And
Yes.
Pat's right about that. But I want to mention something else to consider. What about a statute that is dependent on the most recent victim? In other words, if someone is accused of having sexually assaulted others over a 20-year period, and the most recent one is a year ago, what if you're allowed to look at all of the alleged incidents of sexual assault, even if some of them individually might be beyond the statute of limitations? So, for example, with Roy Moore, if someone had said he did this to me last year, that would trigger being able to prosecute criminally all alleged instances of sexual assault or something like that, right? That's another idea that could be considered.
Sounds right to me. And of course, I'm not a lawyer.
No,
But
by
seems
the
to make
way,
sense.
Pat has to remind us on a regular basis that he's not a lawyer. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And I guess I'll take this as an opportunity to say I'm not a lawyer either.
Nor would anyone hire me.
No, and he's not marketing himself as a lawyer either, please. The issue with indefinite, right, like no statute of limitations, is that for a guilty verdict, you do need to be sure beyond a reasonable doubt that the person is guilty. And you can make a case after 30 years, but the amount of time that has passed in and of itself could constitute what we might say as reasonable doubt, no matter how strongly the witnesses believe they remember the details. And I think that that's something that needs to be considered.
Yeah, especially if there are like scientific breakthroughs that come about, like, DNA testing did in the 1990s. That could, either convict or exonerate someone of that crime.
No doubt about it. All right, those are my thoughts on that one.